The presentations are open for discussion. I'd be very grateful if you introduce yourself before asking the question. And please, questions, not alternative formulations. Thank you. We have half an hour, more than half an hour, so please feel free to ask questions. Savita, please.
First of all, I should mention that today is Teachers' Day. Happy Teachers' Day to all of you. In the spirit of what is being discussed here, the critical spirit and creative spirit, I thought there were large omissions in two presentations made by Professor Manoranjan Mohanty and Manindranath Thakur. In Manind's presentation, let me begin with him. What was missing was the contemporary critical thinking that is going on at the moment against the structured authoritarianism that we have today. Second thing, there was a glaring omission of critical thinking coming from whatever shape feminism is there in India, the feminist quarters. It's very important to, if we are talking about Ambedkar, we cannot miss out on Savitribai Phule. Creative theory has got to be inclusive in that sense. Historically also, if we look back. In Professor Mohanty's presentation, I had expected that he would also talk about, because I consider him to be someone who thought very deeply about creative theory. So what are the features of creative theory he thinks that he can evoke to bring some sense to our present condition? As he asked about the topic, obviously we chose this topic that we're discussing today, future of thinking, precisely in the context of how it has become difficult, even imagine a future, as if we are locked in a present condition where temporarily, in temporal sense also, we are in a confinement, which is been thought out very clearly by the people on the other side. So that criticality I thought was missing from both presentations. If you can say something more, then it would be very nice.
Thank you. Any other question, comment? And then I'll ask Manoranjan and Manindra to reply.
May I ask a question?
Yes, please.
I am Alok Tandon, an independent researcher. I would like to ask Manindra ji that you have very well taken the issue that post-colonialism has got no relevance today. But as Dhananjay has pointed out, the role and the transformed role of religion and its relationship with politics and the capital is to be looked into. But my question is that there are many psychological impediments for independent thinking, and this has been true throughout history, that people have been guided by their prejudices, and it was the last thing to think and to question their own prejudices. As well as Eric Fromm has pointed out, there is a fear of freedom within us. So unless we also look into these psychological impediments of thinking, and you know that once we have people who are not aware of their chains, and they don't want to be aware of, they love their chains. So that type of tradition which controls the thinking of the masses in India, and which is not being questioned properly by the Indian Renaissance, do you not think that we need a cultural Renaissance once again? Thank you.
Thank you. We can take one more question.
May I ask? May I ask one question?
Please.
I'm G.N. Trivedi. Just I have a brief question. I just want Professor Mohanty to reflect that he has talked about authoritarianism. At the moment, the kind of cynicism and apathy towards politics that has taken place, it also gives a new lease of life to authoritarianism. All democratic forces, they are following the logic given by the authoritarian state. You know what has happened in West Bengal, why there is a decline of left. You know, that you know, we are not knowing that there is a gap between ideal and action. Democracy, there everybody is talking about democracy and high ideals, but in real politics, in real practice, they are going away from that. So this constant going away from ideal, going from what Ranjay talked about, the idea of the political, that creates a kind of cynicism, that creates that nothing will happen. This will continue. Whosoever comes to, it will continue. This cynicism and apathy towards politics, that has given new lease to life. What is Professor Mohanty's view on this? That the authoritarianism is also right-thinking people, the progressive forces. They are in a way, either they are confused or they are short of ideas how to confront authoritarianism at this juncture of history. Thank you.
Thank you. Manoranjan, would you like to answer?
Thank you. I think the questions were themselves contributions to creative theory. Now the first point I would like to make, which connects all the comments, is that when we reflect on the challenges, problems bothering us, what do we do? There are so many ways of doing that. We try to understand what the dominant forces are trying to convey. Number one, understand, and I think a little more would be to comprehend, in other words, the inner logic of what is happening. So the first stage of the exercise or act of thinking, act of reflection, act of intervention is comprehend what is happening, and then we find that these are the things about which we are uncomfortable. So we critique, because we have acquired from our study of civilization certain values, certain goals, particularly in the anti-colonial struggle, from our constitution and from several other sources, from our cultural struggles also, certain goals. So the second stage is critique. And the whole dialectical tradition now gives us extremely important tools, and philosophical traditions of all cultures, all societies present us tools of critique. And, the larger dimensions and interconnections that critical theory has presented before us enables us to present that critique even more efficiently. So comprehend the prevailing reality, then critique it. The third stage is to look for alternatives. And there was a whole mode of looking for alternatives. And this is where there is a catch. Rulers then say, okay, you are right, patriarchy is wrong. Caste oppression is wrong. It is unfair to get so low wages, minimum wages, and so on. Minimum wages are so low, and so on. So they make concessions. Yes, you are doing a good thing, go for the alternative. So there is an alternative within capitalist framework, within the ruling class framework, within the larger system. And much of the left and much of the grassroots movements settled for alternatives. So comprehend, critique, then alternative. This is where you find the insufficiency of our intellectual exercise so far. That look, these alternatives are taking us somewhere. Yes, they are built upon the critics, but the critics should lead us to even more things that people have in their history, potentially in their struggles. And that is where we have a view of history as history of unfolding of creativity of civilization, human and now, the planetary civilization as a whole. Then our notion of the human becomes that of a creative being who is increasingly conscious, individually, collectively, always collectively. There is nothing called pure individual. Individual is always in relationship, but the combinations may make a particular individual a certain uniqueness, but that should not be exaggerated the way individualists do. And so we take the human or every species as a creative being. And so the creative theory takes this as a further step beyond seeking of alternatives to discover creativity, creative potentiality, seeing the emergence of these potentiality becoming real. And the feminist movement, above all, more than everybody else, made us aware of this potentiality becoming real, the creative potentiality becoming actual. And then the environment movement, now the climate change resistance movement, was then coming up to the same levels now, together with the feminist movement, to emphasize using the indigenous people's knowledge systems. And during the COVID, we discovered it very well, that how the developed countries failed to, to contend this. And then, we began to realize the value of the alternatives and the indigenous systems of knowledge. But very soon, the developed countries' elites were back to business as usual and reaffirmed techno-capitalist monopolistic answers. Anyway, that will be another answer. Therefore, to Manindra, to Savita and G.N. Trivedi, this formulation on creative theory as an exercise in thinking and acting to enable a process of realization of creativity of human society, human beings, and human civilizations, and its many unfoldings. That is my first answer. I'll be brief on the other points. Now, the point that Dhananjay made, I think, about capitalism and religion, Manindra would, I'm sure, take up that point more competently. I would say that religion appropriates culture. This is the point one has to highlight, and seeks to monopolize culture. Whereas creative theory, and we learned it from Marxism and from Gandhi, from Tagore. I'm glad Ambedkar, and I'm a fan of Kancha Ilaiah for doing this. The cultures of the Dalits, how now we have a view of culture with equal status, or even demanding greater respect of working people's culture, including Dalit working people. So religion's preoccupation to comprehensively monopolize culture. I think that is the problem. And they're using capital's economic resources and technology resources and the state's organizational resources and power to do that. And this is exactly what is happening in India in the agenda of building the Hindu Rashtra under the RSS BJP. And this is where we have to say that there are many religions and pluralism of culture and cultures in all societies. And there are thousands of religions, not the 5-6 big religions, just the big divide between Abrahamic and non-Abrahamic and so on. Sorry, I think the discourse on religions has to be as widespread, deepened, diversified as on culture. Once we do that, then we can expose capitalism's and authoritarianism's use of religion and use of culture to monopolize power and pursue their agenda. Now, the point about progressive movements is, I think also Alok referred to that. Now, please remember, and let us not overdo the post-colonial expression that we have gone beyond post-coloniality. You know, the post-colonial referred to a certain body of thinking and writing which had limitations, and we exposed them. Just as we exposed the body of subaltern studies. But don't forget the contribution that anti-colonial struggle made, the multiple subaltern struggles made to discovering the dimensions of oppression, exploitation, and domination by colonial power. What we are now saying is colonialism was one phase of a long history of oppression, class oppression, caste oppression, race oppression, patriarchal oppression. And feminism, you know, the entire women's movement, the planetary, I'm sorry, Savita, I didn't have the time to say this as clearly as I'm doing it now, but thank you for pointing that out. And I would say equally importantly, the planetary environmental movement, the climate change resistance movement, or the new nature movement, new understanding of nature movement. We are all part of that. And we owe a lot to Marcuse and Gandhi for really alerting us to this challenge. Now, what the left did, it had a limited view of capitalism and limited view of colonialism, and its preoccupation with parliamentary democracy, was a defensive preoccupation, because otherwise they were challenged that they don't believe in the constitution, they don't believe in parliamentary democracy, they are not rooted in this soil, they are not democratic. This kind of ruling class abuses made them so defensive that they adopted the capitalist liberal view of our constitution rather than the creative view of our constitution as a historical document at the end of one stage of our freedom struggle. And its value. I mean, today we have to defend the constitution because it is under attack from authoritarian capitalism and authoritarian fundamentalism. So, therefore, the left and the progressive movements have to be self-critical and have to open up the creative understanding of culture, religion, history, and history of struggles as it is happening all over the world. Okay, just one more word, Neera, about the opportunity. I think even the present oppressive situation gives us opportunities. I think we know from the anti-fascist struggles in Europe, in Latin America, in Africa, and in India, the JP movement or the anti-emergency struggle, and in the anti-colonial struggle, we had many such phases, and the long history of revolts. We found that, we learned that, this creative understanding of history itself and the dialectical, historical, materialist understanding, non-determinist, non-dualistic understanding of history shows that there are opportunities. And during the COVID period, the way the women's movement in the grassroots level responded to the contradictions and created new opportunities is a good example, and how they related the environment movement and the health movement together, fighting state and using some of the knowledge given by modern science. Therefore, we have opportunities in the darkest of conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Manoranjan. Manendra, would you like to reply?
Yeah, thank you. I think one constant question to me is about religion. And within creative theory group, there are two viewpoints in conflict. One which suggests that religion is important and we need to engage with it. Other is of the opinion that religion has always been regressive and we need to almost abandon it, ban it, or whatever. I'm putting it too sharply just to see and there are friends on both the sides, and we have been debating since long, and we keep debating on this, and we will keep debating on this till we convince each other. I think, Dhananjay, you are right. Religion has been with capitalism, supporting capitalism, delivered legitimizing ground for capitalism. But then what is religion? I think that's where we need to really engage with. And religion, is it institution only? Is it something more than that? And why is religion so relevant for capitalism? Why is relevant such a resource for authoritarianism also? Is there something within religion that we need to really see more carefully? There are all kinds of trends. And interestingly, these three thinkers I mentioned, Gandhi, Ambedkar, and Tagore, they, during this freedom struggle, they had very interesting take on religion. Gandhi said that Daya Dharam ko mool hai, Hind Swaraj. And Hind Swaraj has a subtext on religion, and where he's critiquing religion and appreciating religion simultaneously. He says that religion should be taught in the schools to children. Then he was asked, do you think, who will teach religion? He said, definitely not Pandits and Maulvis. The modern educated people should teach religion. So that's one kind of perspective. Ambedkar, in the same article I quoted, he says, there is a philosophy, there are principles of religion and there are rules of religion. We need to reclaim the principles of religion and attack the rules of religion. There is a class mediation, power mediation between rules of religion and principles of religion. And principles are humanitarian. In fact, his paragraph on religion begins with this statement that religion is very important for society. And then he goes on from there. And he has demonstrated by reinterpreting Buddhism in a different way. Tagore has a very interesting book called Religion of Man. Man means human beings for him at the moment. And he very nicely analyzes. And this was a lecture in Oxford. And his book has another chapter on bounds, which was written by Kshitiz Mohan Sen, grandfather of Amartya Sen. And Tagore requested Amartya Sen to write a book on Hinduism. Very small book on Hinduism he has written, which has been now re-edited by, republished by Penguin, and with an introduction from Amartya Sen. I think this is wonderful introduction to Hinduism that he has done. And what he did was wonderful. He discovered the protesting religions. And he discovered Kabir actually, from whom Hazari Prasad Dwivedi picked up Kabir, and then Namwar Singh wrote Ek Aur Parampara Ki Khoj. So they are paramparaye, as Professor Mohanty rightly said, there is plurality. They are paramparaye within religion, and religion is not a monolithic whole. There is a difference between, I mean, there are notions of religion, I'm sure, and one has to really engage with that. And critical theory has very interesting take on religion. I've read some writings of critical theorists on religion, including of Erich Fromm. So I think we need to really engage with religion more seriously than what people have done with religion earlier, particularly Marxists. Marxist friends have picked up a statement from Marx, which is not even a representative statement of Marx. The religion is the opium of masses. It is not a representative statement. I think more representative statement is religious world is a reflex of real world. I mean, I have a whole argument on this. A few of my friends are aware of that. So I think religion has to be taken more seriously. And of late, now we have examples in Latin America during this anti-colonial struggle, anti-fascist struggle, the way they have engaged with religion. I think that's in continuum with the way Gandhi, Tagore, and Ambedkar engaged with religion. So therefore, there's a need to see that differently. It's, of course, institutionalized religion have contributed to the fascist state or fascist philosophies, but that's not the only thing. I think we have a full panel on religion, spirituality, and politics on 10th. I'm sure more vibrant discussion will take place there. And this group suggests that religion should also be treated as a knowledge system. And that's our larger argument.
Manendra, we have 5 minutes more. If we have any more questions, please, yeah, okay. Carry on.
No, just 1 minute, if I can.
Yeah.
For Savita's this thing. Savita is talking about feminism. I think, Savita, I didn't have time to talk about it, but I'm exploring and I'm trying to educate myself in the history of feminism in India. And 3 people I have, of course, Tarabai Sinde is one very important, but there are a couple of more people I'm finding extremely important. One is Mahadevi Verma, and third is Zebu Nisha. Zebu Nisha is was Aurangzeb's daughter, who was in prison for 20 years. And in prison, she has written, like Prison's Notebook, 5,000 couplets. That's an wonderful example of feminist thinking. I'm trying to lay my hands on that. And I hope with my friends in Persian, I will be able to tell you tomorrow that how this great woman was thinking about freedom and liberation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any more questions? We have room for about 2 questions more. No? Yeah, quickly, please.
Is it to me? I'm Sujata.
Yes.
I teach in JNU. I had I was listening to the very interesting responses to the questions. And I have a question for Professor Mohanty. While responding to the queries, you began by saying that one has to criticize, comprehend, and then a lot of alternatives have emerged. But we have to go beyond alternatives, if I understood correctly. I wanted to understand more what exactly you meant that that alternatives are not adequate. One has to go beyond it. Are you looking at a full-blown revolution or guerrilla warfare like the Maoists, etc.?
It will require a different seminar. I'm sorry.
No. So what exactly is you had in mind about the alternatives, and whether NGOs, small groups, and alternative forms of life within full-blown market economy, capitalism, would you take them seriously?
Manoranjan, do you feel compelled to answer? Or would you like a separate panel for this? Can't hear you.
You're muted.
You're muted.
You know, there is a journal Alternatives. Then there was an alternative movement promoted by liberals. And many of them I respect, and they played a very important role. But what I'm saying is, like critique is a critique of the dominant, alternative is alternative to the dominant, still being on the preoccupation that is based on the reference point to the dominant, alternative to capitalism. Whereas people's experience not only talk about alternative to capitalism, but also many new possibilities which emerge from their history, from their experiences. So beyond capitalism, there are many possibilities. This is the point. For example, Gandhi was not looking for an alternative to Western capitalism. His was a, in English, we immediately use the term alternative, but a range of possibilities which were not just derivative from the reference point of capitalism or the colonial knowledge system or the economic system. This is the point. So creative theory not only comprehends and critiques the dominant and finds alternatives to the dominant, finds possibilities going much beyond the alternatives of that time. This is the point. And we can discuss more on it.
Thank you. I have two very brief comments to make. You know, I would rather concentrate on Manoranjan's comment that one has to constantly engage in self-critique. Philosophy is the art of constant critique. And that is why Pradeep Gokhale has said that Charvak is the most perfect philosophical school you can find in India, because it constantly engages with whatever is offered, even as an alternative. I think it's and that brings me to my second point. When we are looking, so we have to be very sure that even the notion of creative theory colloquium has to be subjected to self-critique. Otherwise, you'll have what has happened to Kavita Krishnan. She's had to leave the movement because the party will not accept her critique of its own position. It's very sad, I think. That is the state of the left. The second point, and I want to finish in time, is that many of the critiques that are being offered to dominant epistemologies rely upon our national movement, and particularly Gandhi. I have a very naive question, and I'm saying it very hesitatingly because of many reasons. Why did Gandhi, despite having fought for Hindu-Muslim unity all his life, he was ready to lay down his life for the Muslims, why did he use such Vedantic terminology? Swaraj. In 1931, he said Swaraj is a sacred word. Now, 1931 was a major riot in Kanpur, and he himself promoted the Karachi Resolution on Fundamental Rights. And the more and more I think about it, why did our national leadership, who we are relying upon as an alternative, skip 500 years of Islam and go to Vedic India, which was casteist, metaphysical, Brahmanical? Our national movement, rhetoric, our language was very Brahmanical. What the hell does Swaraj mean? Now, people can tell me I'm looking at Swaraj through the eyes of Isaiah Berlin. Maybe I am. But that is not necessarily a disadvantage. Gandhi, I have read 10 different contexts in which Gandhi has used Swaraj, and they're all different. Finally, he told Nehru, my perfect village community does not exist. It still has to come into existence. And Nehru said, I appreciate your ability to touch the heart of the masses, but your notion of personal sin, self-discipline, self-control, it's a very Vedic, it's a very Brahmanical concept. is purely personal. I am involved with the issue of changing society. That was a problem with Gandhi. You see, I've said it again and again. Learn to look at Gandhi as a political philosopher. And what do we do to political philosophers? When we look at Plato, we don't go to his communism of wives. We go to his theory of justice, and even that we critique. So it is necessary to engage with Gandhi and not look at his vocabulary as self-explanatory, because I think he used it. There is a lot of difference between the way Dadabhai Naoroji first uses Swaraj in the official Congress discourse 1906, in which he means self-determination. Gandhi 1909 in his Hind Swaraj is completely different. He's responding to the Indian school of violence. That was the precise context. Krishan Chandra Bhattacharya 1929 writes about Swaraj and ideas, which is a very nuanced paper, but the answer was by his critic, which culture is he speaking of? My culture is that of not only ancient India, but also Ghalib. It is also M.F. Hussain. It is also Guru Gobind Singh. Why? What is also the Adivasis? The Adivasis have adopted Brahmanical idioms, and Brahmanical Hinduism has adopted Adivasi idioms. So you have to understand the plurality of India. To talk about culture, it is not easy. And finally, Ambedkar's very sharp critique of Swaraj. I mean, Hindus can't look within themselves. They want to practice self-discipline, but they can't get rid of caste. And every morning you see some horrible story or the other about caste atrocities in India. So my suggestion is, and finally, why is it nobody has looked at 500 years of Islam, starting from Raja Ram Mohan Roy? He goes back to Vedantic Hinduism. First of all, Islam and India presented a complete example of fusion. Not British India. British India colonized us. You look at Khayal. I'm just reading a very interesting paper. Khayal is the core of the Indian classical music tradition. Careers have fallen and risen on their mastery of Khayal. And I just read a paper in which it is said, an expert on Indian music, Khayal didn't come from Amir Khusro, who was India born. Khayal comes from Aurangzeb's court. Aurangzeb banned religion, but only for himself, because he practiced piety. He was the greatest patron of music. Khayal comes up in his court. And you know, you have to understand, Khayal also is influenced by Amir Khusro's Qawwali, as well as Drupad, but Khayal is central to our Indian musical tradition. Our cuisine, our language, our manners, our architecture, our painting, our literature is influenced by Islam. Why will we not accept it? None of the national leaders accepted it except Nehru. Nehru did accept the creativity of Islam. So we have to be careful. And finally, very small, I've just reviewed Romila Thapar's Voices of Dissent for Pacific Affairs, which comes out from the University of British Columbia. And Romila makes two distinctions. She distinguishes between Brahmanical Vedic Hinduism, second millennium, which didn't have any temples, no idols. It was purely abstract. Even then, they had the dasas, who I assume they mean the Adivasis. And she says, it's very interesting. In her book, she writes that whenever a dasi had a relationship with a Brahmin man and they had a child, many of sons basically became sages. They were referred to by their mother's name. So matrilinealism comes into that kind of Brahmanical Hinduism, which is patriarchal. Secondly, first century millennium, she talks about Puranic Hinduism, where your temples have come and your idols have come, mainly Shiva and Vishnu. Now, they were challenged by not only Buddhism, who, I'm sorry, but Vivekananda colonized by making Buddha the 8th avatar of Vishnu. Buddha was a critic of Hindu caste system. There was Buddhism. Jainism was always there, even before Vedic Hinduism. But Charvak philosophy, Samkhya and Samkhya philosophy is a part of Vedanta. That's my contribution, it's not Romila. But she said there are debates within Hinduism. You actually have a discipline of debate. It's called Vad Vidya. You know how to debate. you want to demolish your opponent, but there were a lot of critique of Hinduism. And she says that Puranic Hinduism actually reaches out to the popular classes in order to get devotees, because everybody's moving to the Bhakti, and finally the Bhakti movement. She says everybody moved to the Bhakti movement. So what they did was they appropriated local heroes. And the example she gives of Pandharpur, where Vithaba Vinoba is actually a military hero. He saves his village from the invader, but the cult of Vishnu is imposed upon him. So Vinoba is a cult of Vishnu, but he's originally a hero. And then it is the British, it is actually the German romantics, 17th century, 18th century, who make Vedas the definitive criteria of Hinduism, because it suited, I'm sorry, Protestantism. Please remember, our colonists were Church of England. They were Protestants. They were not Catholics. Catholics worship rivers and trees, and they have all kinds of hero worshipping. This, the Church of England was a product of positivism. They are rational. The Vedas suited them. So in fact, when we talk of Hinduism, be very careful which branch of Hinduism we are speaking of. And I wrote a piece for the Tribune the other day saying, I'm sorry, Swaraj is a very deceptive word. Do you really want the government in post-independence India to monitor your self-discipline? I mean, for God's sake, that is our personal ethics. Gandhi confuses personal with political ethics. That finally I'm going to say, Swaraj, Manendra, is very well used in your presentation, but be critical about Swaraj. I don't think even Gandhi realized how confused he was. Finally, Chodi Choda. When they asked the villagers of Chodi Choda, what does Swaraj mean to you? They said less taxation. Now tell me, between Gandhi's abstract Hindu formulations of self-discipline and less taxation, where is the commonality? I don't think anybody has understood Swaraj. And I cannot understand Arvind Kejriwal's book on Swaraj. Frankly, I can't even understand Yogendra Yadav's naming of a political party after Swaraj, because nobody seems to be sure what Swaraj means. It only means what Dadabhai Naoroji held it to mean, self-determination. That is all. Leave people to practice the kind of lives they want. Have a political ethics that is respectful of other religious vocabularies, political vocabularies. And my suggestion is adopt Azadi. It is a much more neutral concept than Swaraj, which is very Brahmanical. And we don't want to fall into the Brahmanical trap again, please. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I've taken a little time, but I think Manendra, take me as a friendly disagreement. I'm not criticizing. Where is he? He's disappeared.
No, I'm around. I take this.
It's you're our future, and we look to you to be critical about our own political vocabulary.
Sure.
And we have to look at these. What does Sarvodaya, and you know how much violence there was in the partition of Bengal when they came up with the whole notion of what was it, self-determination? What was the word that began with a swa again? When they said use Indian clothes, use Indian, how much?
Swadeshi.
Swadeshi. You know how critical Tagore was of Swadeshi? He gave up on, he said, this is very Hindu. This is very Brahmanical. I'm giving up on Swadeshi. See Gare Baire to understand the violence. So we must use our alternative vocabularies very carefully. That is my lifelong ambition to write something on this. I am very hesitant. Maybe I will look for feedback from you guys to even start thinking about it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you to all the speakers and specifically Chair for conducting this this panel discussion, and that too within the time. Now let me invite Rashi. It's good that Professor Chendoke has brought about the plurality of epistemologies onto the fore, because the next panel has to do with that. Rashi, may I request you to conduct the next session?